Do you want to learn the recipe for great, extraordinary, immersive experiences? To know what you really like and be there together with others to enjoy more of it? Our guest today is Paul Zak, the neuroscientist, oxytocin expert, hugger, father, and founder of Immersion Neuroscience. We talk about presence, play, social connection, and technology to help us all along the way. Here is my conversation with Paul Zak. All right, Paul, nice to see you here. Let's talk about immersion, the benefits of it, how to get into an immersive state, how to create immersive states for each other. So we'll start with the very beginning. What is happening neurophysiologically in our body, in our brain, when we are immersed in an experience?
Right. So for listeners, I'm using immersion with a capital I as a technical term. So this is a 1 second frequency signal that we can pull out of the brain or out of the cranial nerves. And it, in sort of 20 years of research, appears to be how the brain values social emotional experiences. So that's it. It's a big network in the brain, primarily driven by two neurochemicals and the electrical activity they induce. The first is dopamine binding to the prefrontal cortex. So if I'm going to have a great experience, first of all, I've got to be present. Right? If I'm distracted, then it's not going to be a great experience. The second is that experience has got to generate emotional value for me. So I call that emotional resonance. It's got to resonate with me, which we've traced largely to the action of oxytocin. And as you know, Michael, oxytocin and dopamine have this very interesting interplay between each other. They kind of reinforce each other's release. And so we can pick up that activity at the level of the brain. But we found that we get really nice signals from the cranial nerves. These are the kind of big bundles of nerves out of the brain's output file to the rest of the body. And so I'm a prediction guy. I'm not a feelings guy. I'm not a intentions guy. So we identified immersion in work we were doing to identify neural correlates that would predict people's behaviors after an experience. And so lots of research and, lots of mistakes. And it's not like we knew what we were doing for many, many years. And so just to cap off your question, what we've shown very recently is that we can use immersion to identify those experiences that help boost your mood, help boost your energy, and have quantified how many you need per day to be what I call emotionally fit, right? So I want to think about emotional life as similar to our physical life. Obviously, they're related to each other. But just like we can build our physical fitness, we can build our emotional fitness. And we've created an app that allows people to see what their brain is valuing and therefore make better choices to build their happiness.
Okay, so it's immersion with a capital I. I was thinking with a lowercase I as well. How does the capital I immersion add on to or differ from this other sort of English word of immersion, of presence, or basically presence is how I see it. But it seems like there's more packed into it than that.
Yeah, so I think presence is the necessary condition to have a great experience. I might be. I was driving across a really tall bridge recently, and over water, and I was totally focused. Right, I was really present. It wasn't, I think, a super enjoyable experience, but I was certainly there. Where if I see a movie or hang out with friends or do whatever, I'm both present, but I'm also getting a lot of that emotional value from it. So presence is the first thing we've got to get. So if we don't have that, then I think we're losing the ability to have extraordinary experiences.
How do we get the presence? What are some ways to get the presence? I know there are like a lot of other kind of preconditions and ways to enhance all this, but let's start with presence.
Yeah, I think it's really slowing down and removing distractions. I realized the other day I was brushing my teeth, watching my phone. 10 years ago, you just brush your teeth. When it was 2 minutes, right? Now I got to have my freaking phone with me. So I think by slowing down, by getting rid of those distractions, by say taking a walk or hike without things in your ears giving you noise, just being able to be fully there. So I have a dog. I do a lot of hiking, and I get up early, so I hike a lot of times pre-dawn. And if you're hiking on a path and it's narrow and there are wild animals, I'm like, you got to be fully present. And it's an amazing experience to some places I've hiked, there are predators. I mean, there could be eaten. So you really have to be on. And I think the research has shown that if you train yourself to be present, for example, like people who meditate do, right, that really being able to just be in the moment, then it opens up a lot of your life to be present in other experiences.
Yeah, I'm on vacation right now in Kuala Lumpur. All of my vacations I've been on, of course, I've been more present, but particularly when I take out my earbuds, I've noticed that the whole world changes. I do maybe get into this capital I immersion state because people start to talk to me, and I don't know, we start to interact, and things like that start happening. So this is maybe what you meant by it's a precondition or necessary condition for immersion, but yeah, it does sort of open up the possibility for these kinds of encounters, which when I'm, say, if I got my earbuds in or my eyes locked into my phone, for example, it just won't happen. But it could happen, and it very well does happen when I'm just like, the more present I am, the more social I become. Is there kind of connection between being social and having a deep connection with others, and presence?
Great neuroscience question, right? We have found in almost every case that when you add a social layer to the experience you're having, the immersion is substantially higher. So, again, the easiest way to get social emotional value is to be around people that you like, that you care about, that are interesting, right? And so, if I'm alone, I can still have an immersive state. I may be immersed in the project I'm working on or at a movie or whatever that is. It doesn't have to be an active task, but that social component adds a lot more. So I had a friend today that asked me a really interesting friend who asked me this very kind of deep question about philosophy, and I told her something, and I said, I try to have rules for my life to live a better life, and one of my rules is to tell at least one person a day that you love them. And this is a friend I've known for maybe a year or so, and older lady, and I said, so I'm going to use this on you in my email. I said, so I love you in the philia sense, right? I value you as a friend. I think you're an amazing human being. And just so that you know that I'm committed to our friendship. And so, well, that's a kind of interesting, weird thing to do. And it's easier when you're older and you have gray hair and, I don't care what people think about me. And so I know she'll love that. And I want to make sure she knows that I care about her a lot. So I'm facilitating that social connection or strengthening that social connection.
Yeah. You're also a big hugger, I've learned. After like listening to you talk about that, I'm like, ooh, I want to hug people. I wanted to hug this freaking my room attendant, Rajul or whatever his name is. Yeah, Rajul. He's great. He looks at me and he smiles and got this warm, soft eye gazing, and I just feel really, really nice with him, and it makes the whole hotel experience great. Even though the front desk was like, and everyone else was like, he I don't know. I want to do something for him. I don't know. This is amazing. I love it. How do you like right now? I'm talking to you, and I want to connect with you. I want to be like, let's just talk as humans. But sometimes we are talking to someone, and their like status appears higher than us. Like you're like this professor, and you write these books, and you're like a little bit famous or something. But I want to like throw all those ideas out and just be like, and just connect. And so this is like podcasting, for example. But we have this problem a lot of times in our lives. Maybe you're talking to this hot chick or something or whatever, and you're like, you start to get in your head and you're not really connected. You're trying to impress them or something, or I don't know, you're not quite there. And I hope to get there, and I want to be there right now. But yeah, what do you recommend for people in these situations? It might be a job interview, for example, or whatever, something they really, really care about, but they're not really sure they're worthy of or something. They're too worried about something. They're too in their head. I feel like I'm connected to you, but I want to have that deep connection like I had with Rajul.
Wonderful, Rajul. No, it's a great question. I love brain hacks. And so the hugging was a brain hack. We showed that touch induces the release of oxytocin. And so just as a sort of self-experiment, I started, you meet someone that want to shake your hand, like, oh, I hug everybody. Now, who do you hug? People that you know, people that you like. And so all of a sudden, their brain is telling them, hey, this must be someone safe. And I always pre-announce because occasionally people are a little bit, odd about it. Like they were a little socially anxious and I don't want to be hugged. I'm like, oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
We can shake hands. It's totally
Uh-huh.
fine. So I think the first is really giving people the gift of being present, as you said, right?
Yeah.
Making eye contact, really listening to them, slowing down the conversation. Sometimes we are so excited to talk about the next thing that we've thought about that I'm not really fully focused on what you are saying to me. And I think that's really important. I think from a
Yeah.
job interview or cute guy or cute girl, having that true interest in them as a full human being, right, is a real gift. And by the way, that's a gift that can induce. I think of immersion as a gift you have to give someone else, right? You can kind of self-induced immersion, again, like crying at the end of a movie or something. But if you're really connected to somebody, they're going to reflect that back generally and also have that sense of connection to you. It's now this nice reciprocal sharing of immersion. So immersion is contagious. That's the punchline here. And so if I want to really connect to someone, if I want them to connect to me, I've got to connect to them first or give
Yeah.
them at least that option.
Yeah. Something I also have to do usually in these situations where I overly prepared or something, like I literally listen to like 100 hours of your interviews. But now it's like before the big test, you studied, and you're ready to go. And then you're like, so I just got like, well, I like doing this one. I like just crumpling it up and like that, and it's scary. But then you're like, you got nothing but you. And I
Right.
imagine the more immersive experiences you have, I imagine it would kind of rewire your brain and your way of being in general, where you would be your default state would be your baseline would be more immersed.
Exactly right. Yeah. So the research shows really good evidence in animals, and I think an emerging set of evidence in humans that if you learn to be present and emotionally open, that you induce neuroplasticity, and then it becomes easier to do that. So I can give you some concrete examples. So I'm a big introvert, Michael. I can sit in the lab for 12 hours and not talk to anybody and actually be totally fine. I mean, I like people, obviously, but I realized I was spending, particularly early in my career, you have to get tenure, it's very stressful. And I was kind of losing my social skills. I wasn't interacting with anybody other than my graduate students. And so I started really investing in relationships, right? Making sure that I not only went out and hung out with my friends and made new friends, but really thought about things for them, right? What would make that person happy? Could I bring them a little gift? Can I invite them to dinner? All these kind of things that we do to invest in relationships. And then like 10 years ago, I turned 50 and I had 4 surprise birthday parties. Not because I think I'm such a great person, but because I had invested in these relationships and then people generally want to reciprocate that investment. So isn't that amazing? But so even as an introvert, you can actually spend that investment wisely. And here's the real punchline is that if you look at your happiness, about 50% of that, half of that is due to the quality of your social connections. Half. I like to be happy. So, I even as an introvert, I have to invest in social relationships. Even if you're the most selfish person possible and you
Yeah.
want to live longer and happier. So also people with rich social ties live longer and healthier. So if you're selfish and you just want to live longer and happier, you still have to be a social creature. And that means you have to invest in other people. Otherwise, they're not going to be invested in you, right? So,
Yeah.
so then you have this interesting little conundrum, which is I'm a selfish bastard, but now I have to give to other people so I can live longer and happier. And then what happens? You become less selfish, right? That's what happens in the brain. And then you become good at this thing. So here's a quick example, Michael, if I may. So I love these little self-experiments. I do them all the time.
Yeah.
It's like 10 years ago, I decided it's so weird to have social creatures like humans in a box who don't talk to each other. So that happens in elevators. So what would happen if I start talking to people randomly in elevators? So I started doing this. And what I found was about half those people are kind of freaked out, which somehow makes me happy. And the other half, you have this really nice 20 or 30-second conversation. Often it's in a hotel or something like, oh, where are you coming in from? Oh, that's great. Oh, have a nice time. And I really enjoy it. And I feel like I make those people's day a little happier. Now, I'm not building a relationship and I'm not going to see them again, but it reminds me to be a person of service to others, right? And I think that is something we sometimes forget in our busy, busy lives.
Yeah. Might make everyone else kind of open up a little bit and start talking too. I noticed this. I talked to someone in the elevator the other day, and then everyone else started chatting it up. We had a little thing going on for 20 seconds. No, that was really cool. So it does spread. So the more you give immersive experiences to each other and to yourself, gradually that could change culture and change larger socioeconomic things and things. I'll be, wow, that's amazing.
So you're actually making society a little bit better by giving someone that gift, and then they want to reciprocate to the next person they see. So hugs are the same way, by the way. If I go in a room and I'm meeting people and I hug people, everyone else starts hugging each other. They just need that little spark that goes, "This is okay." And by the way, who needs the hugs the most? tends to be young males. So women tend to be much more touchy with each other. But like if you're a 25-year-old male, you're not playing sports anymore, or whatever, you're working, a lot of times you're not being touched at all. So like it's so funny to hug some dude who's 25. Sometimes they blush, which makes me happy because that's a brainstem response that you can't control. And then everyone starts laughing, and then you just end up having the best time ever. And so to me, that's just a little bit of a gift I'm going to give to other people. Like I'm going to say like, hey, I'm here. I care about you. It's all good.
And a lot of what you're talking about right now does also connect up with your idea about we don't really know who we are or what we like or what we want sometimes. So you might say, "Hey, I'm an introvert. I don't need people. People don't make me happy. I don't like them. Oh, I'm some dude. I don't want to hug. I don't like hugs. I'm not a hugger.
Right.
Um, or maybe I don't like that movie. I don't like this food or whatever, this and that. There's some things we do know about ourselves. It seems from your paper you wrote recently, we do kind of have some awareness of our overall mood and energy levels. That seems to be something that maybe we can't predict ourselves, but preferences and what we really want and like, we are often mistaken. But by measuring the neurophysiological things through the smartwatches, for example, or there are other ways like EEG, maybe you can use eye tracking or something, but you're using the PPG sensors on the smartwatches, it seems, and maybe something else we'll get into. We can see, oh, this is what I really am. Well, at least in this moment and across time, if we keep tracking it, and then we can get a better insight into what we actually like and want, and what others like and want, just to make overall better experiences, saving us energy, saving us time, money, etc.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the do not do list, right? The only way to really kind of optimize your life is to know which things you should cut out. So one of the great management thinkers of the 20th century, Peter Drucker, overlapped with me at Claremont College University for about 10 years. And Peter wrote, I think, I don't know, in the 60s or something, that every individual and every organization should do a annual do not do list, right? So list the stuff you normally do and then throw out the bottom. He said the bottom 2/3. Just amazing. So really focus your energy on what's most. So what we've done is quantify that neurologically and then link that to your calendar so you can see like, oh, here's the stuff I really value doing because I don't really know, right? That valuation mechanism is deep in the brainstem. So yeah, it's difficult to know what gives you the most value, and it can change over time as well. So I think by having a tool, you can make better decisions. And, again, I'm kind of an extremist on the do not do. I want to live, because of the issue of presence that you raised, I want to live the simplest, most focused life possible. So that means I say no to a bunch of stuff. And I think that's okay. If it's a thoughtful no and not a, random, just gonna be a cranky curmudgeon or something, that's not good.
I'm still trying to figure out exactly how you measure this, because you're not hooking things up to the brain. There's nothing on your head. It's all through the smartwatch, through this PPG sensor and maybe others. And I'm trying to imagine, because it's a bit indirect. I'm trying to figure out how exactly you get information about their oxytocin levels and their dopamine levels in their prefrontal cortex, their level of attention, their level of emotional resonance through this light blinking on your wrist. And then, yeah, can you kind of, as best as you can, without revealing the algorithm or whatever, how we get from this smartwatch to the brain?
Right. So we have to go back, 20 years. So we were funded, my lab was funded pretty heavily post 9/11 by Department of Defense and other agencies that asked us to identify how we can persuade other people to cooperate with the U.S. They want to give soldiers this new superpower called words, which I'm good at. Let's use words rather than weapons, at least on a first cut, if we can do that. So in my lab, we always start with measurements of changes in neurochemical. So we would do a blood draw. We would give people some kind of experience. A lot of these were public service announcements. So you watch some video about homeless people, and then we do another blood draw. And then afterwards, we paid you money because we're torturing you and say, okay, you earned $40. Privately, if you want, you can donate some money to a homeless charity or not. And then we compared the changes in neurochemicals for people who responded, who were persuaded by those videos, and people who were not. That linked us to the downstream effects of dopamine, which is an arousal chemical, so it has downstream effects, and oxytocin. And then from there, measured about 140 signals simultaneously, both in the brain and the peripheral nervous system. So we do that because then we can optimize this measurement for those areas that are rich in receptors for dopamine and oxytocin, which we did, and then basically put these signals to a statistical sieve many, many times and had lots of different tasks that people could do or not do volitionally. And then finally, what we found was, because I'm a prediction guy and not a feeling guy, that most neurons are multi-purpose, particularly cortical neurons, the neurons on the outside of the head. And so they fail to consistently predict people's activity. But when we got activity from the cranial nerves, this again is the brain's output file, this is a nice network effect. And some of those cranial nerves pass through the heart. So then we used pharmaceutical studies, drug studies, to trace out these changes in the rhythms of the heart. It's like acceleration, deceleration of the heart into what happens in the cranial nerves into the brain. And so those are all published. And then finally, we took these multiple signals and convolved them mathematically to maximize our ability to predict outcomes. For example, in a recent publication, I think I didn't send it to you, we worked with a music streaming company that they said, hey, we're overwhelmed with new music. Everyone's creating music. We don't know what to put in people's playlists. Could your measurement of what people value identify hit songs? I'm like, that's a great question. Sure. No one's ever done that before. Let's just try that. So they sent us a bunch of music that was just being released, and we had people listen to it, measure their neurologic immersion. And we, of course, asked them questions. Do you like it? Would you share this? Or would you listen to it again? Do you think it'd be a hit? None of that self-reported stuff predicted anything. But then 3 months later, they gave us number of streams, number of additions to playlists, but a bunch of outcome variables, and we can actually predict hits with 97% accuracy before the music became a hit. So what's interesting here is that these signals that we see are so evolutionarily old, they're deep in the brainstem, that they're very consistent across individuals. So your brain somehow knows a hit song, even though you don't know it consciously, and that's very similar to what lots of other people's brains know as well. So I liked what you said earlier, Michael, that we don't really know our preferences for those experiences we have not had before. I can't really tell you how. I've never been to Malaysia. I can't tell you much. I like Kuala Lumpur. I read about it. I can kind of guess. I've been a couple of places in Asia, but unless I'm there, I can't really tell you much about it. And so I've got to experience it. And if I experience it, and somehow I realize, oh, this is an amazing place, great hotel staff, great whatever that is, wonderful food.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to do this again. I want to add that to my to-do list, not my do not do list.
Yeah. And you're right there by Loma Linda, a blue zone. Are there kind of like oxytocin zones or immersion zones throughout the world or the United States? Because I see there are places where people are more emotionally expressive and they exhibit more safety and calm, and you just feel more connected with these people. And I know we shouldn't be like shaming certain cultures or whatever, but have you found certain spots that you think, oh, this is like sort of an immersion zone?
Yeah, I don't think we have enough variation in the data yet to say that, but it certainly seems that way. Like, Southern cultures and Italians are much warmer. So Loma Linda is a blue zone. So people know these are regions in which people regularly live past 100. And we've actually done a fair amount of research on the super old people. So it's a blue zone because it's a company town. The company is a medical center, and the medical center is run by Seventh-day Adventists, which is a kind of Protestant sect in which they're vegetarian, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they exercise, and they socialize. And they also tend to be in helping professions, a lot of physicians, a lot of nurses, a lot of teachers. And so I'm not Seventh-day Adventist, I should say. When I first moved there, their Sabbath is Saturday. Well, Saturday, I got to do yard work. I got a house. I'm like, hey, it's not my Sabbath. Like, they're socializing, they're having meals. And then after I lived there a couple of years, I'm like, don't be a jerk, right? Like, I don't really have to make noise on Saturday if that's the day of their rest day. I can clean my yard on Sunday or whatever it is. And so I think that focus on making a commitment to socialize, and that for them includes going to church, but that could just be a social activity, visiting friends, having people over. There's a real focus on that social component. And we already know, right? Diet, exercise, sleep, like those are the first three pillars. The fourth is, again, that rich social network. And the fifth is a sense of purpose. So we can measure both am I socializing enough with the right people with our technology, and am I expressing my sense of purpose, right? Purpose for most of us involves other people, right? Maybe my purpose is to be a great rock climber or a great sailor, but you're seldom doing that alone, right? So you're doing that with somebody else. So anyway, I want to work on those last of those 5 pillars, those last two, and help people really quantify if they're getting enough social interactions and enough purpose to live to 100.
How about timing? It seems that in the study that you sent me, the morning hours and the early afternoon hours, people's energy and mood levels in general were higher. There were more of these sort of peak immersion experiences, but I could have been misreading that because it's like a science paper and you misread things. How might this change across the course of the day and even the course of the year? So extrapolating from that, if I got it right, I would imagine that even like summer might overall have more immersive events. You might be in a more positive mood, more social, but again, it might depend on you. Yeah, have you looked at any of the data or thought about the timing of all of this?
No, you are right that we tend to see more peak immersion moments in the morning on average for people. So it turns, and it's consistent with other data showing that people who are, morning people actually tend to be a bit happier than night people on self-report. Yeah, so summertime, you have more hours, more sunshine, it's warmer, people go out more, you have a greater chance to socialize. Many locations have, outdoor events, music festivals, and whatever in the summer, where those short winter days, you're kind of hunkered down a bit more, so you're not getting out as much. The I wrote in my book about these wonderful rituals that happen in the Nordic countries, in which they really focus, like in Loma Linda, on socializing. So in Sweden, they call it Fika. In Denmark, they call it Hygge. So I have a appointment at a medical school in Denmark, so I go there for about a month at a time. And Hygge is basically like kind of like the British afternoon tea. So they basically have at your business, they have kind of recreation room, and then there's like coffee and tea and cookies, and then people go and kind of socialize. And so I think that's a really important way, particularly when those days are short and it's too cold, you don't want to go out to dinner or something in the wintertime. But now inside the building, we have this place to get together. And I think, all of that is recognizing how important in-person human connection is. So I do worry about so many people working at home and not getting out and seeing humans, right? So, the bandwidth I'm going to get on my brain from an in-person interaction is going to be higher than if I'm on a conference call with somebody, even if it's a video call.
Yeah. Right now, as you're talking, I can hear the morning prayer. They do these prayers, in Islam, they do the morning prayer, and it's different times of day. And now it gets me thinking, oh, it's not just a way to connect to God or whatever. It's a way to connect with each other at the bookends of the day, and throughout the day. It's like, oh, what a great way to start the day. I mean, even if you're not religious, like you're just like chanting together, basically.
Sure, in community, yeah. So we actually had a research program on ritual some years ago where this is before we had the wearable technology. So we actually did blood draws, and we went in actually with permission to churches. We went into like soldiers marching, all these rituals that you do. Like soldiers don't march into battle, right? You're either driving in a Humvee or you're going single file so you don't get shot. But marching is about entrainment of your not only your physical sense but your emotional sense with these other people. And anyway, what we found was that in churches, that most of the value, most of the immersion came from community that we couldn't find for people who said, "Oh, I had this like spiritual experience. I talked to God or whatever." That we couldn't find any neural correlates of that. So yeah, I think churches are really a lot about community, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if there's a spiritual component in addition, awesome. But I think we need to be in community as social creatures. So if it's a church, if it's a sports club, if it's a whatever that is, it's all community building. And if it's a ritual, like in Islam or in Catholicism, where you are required to go to church every Sunday, lots of other faiths, it commits you to a ritual that involves other people. And so that probably is a pro-health activity.
Yeah. What do you recommend for people who just literally don't have anybody, got nobody? Are there ways to get some of this through, say, non-human parts of reality?
For sure. So I think, as we said earlier, sort of training your brain to be more present and more emotionally open can be done a whole variety of ways. So emotional movies, I think from a neuroscience perspective, it's super interesting that people cry in movies. Like, it's not your life. These are fictional characters. So that's a way to help kind of open yourself up and train you. Dogs are a really efficient way to do this. So if you're not comfortable, sort of connecting with other people or kind of live alone, So we've done dog versus cat research and published it. Dogs are just much better at inducing those peak immersion moments than cats are. Cats are unpredictable. And then I think the third is really volunteering. So, we all have some extra time. So if you volunteer, you'll meet other people like you who want to help other people, who are nice people. I do a lot of hiking, as I said, and then I started thinking, hey, I should help clear the trails. I'm strong, I'm healthy, I'm out. I use these trails a lot. So anyway, I signed up to be sort of drive this thing that clears the trails. And I tell you, how many people stopped, hikers and mountain bikers, stopped oh, thank you so much for helping out. And I'm like, oh, I get it, right? Not only did I meet some other nice volunteers, I had a nice lunch, but I had all this nice positive feedback that made me feel really good. I want to keep doing this. This is actually really fun.
Wow. Yeah, because you could even be almost the angriest person, like angriest looking person out there hiking. I don't know how you could be angry hiking, but you were. People will still say hi to you because it's such I don't know, whenever people open up there. I guess it's a presence or the lack of distractions or whatever. But being out in nature hiking, everyone's saying hi, and then if you're cleaning and doing something nice, I just imagine they must really love you the way I love Fred Jewell.
And the dog is great. So people
Yeah.
who have dogs are seen as trustworthy, as safe. And so people will cross the street sometimes and go oh, can I see your dog? I'm like, yeah, sure, pet my dog. It's nice.
Yeah.
And so that's a nice way just to have those little social interactions. And then you get to know people. I walk in the mornings. And so, I know, I don't know, 5, 6 people I see almost on a daily basis who live in my neighborhood who are out walking with or without dogs. And then we chat a little bit. And at some point we exchange phone numbers and you grab coffee and, then you form a little social group.
Yeah. And all of this prediction stuff seems great, of course, for business, for advertising, movies, hotels, whatever, to make money. But it also, as you've highlighted, it's important for and useful for predicting and maybe helping with mental health or physical health disorders.
I'm sure. So yeah, in the research I sent you and in some research that will publish very soon, we've shown that we can predict what looks like pre-depressive symptoms neurophysiologically before people have a crisis. So do you have low mood and low energy? Those are kind of the hallmarks of depression. And it turns out that by quantifying if you're getting enough social interaction, social withdrawal is actually a predictor or what's called in medicine a prodrome for a whole variety of medical disorders from Parkinson's disease to autoimmune disease to heart failure. People slowly, as these systems kind of break down in the body, they slowly begin to pull back. And so by having a measure that says, hey, here's your data, it's kind of wiggly up and down, and now we see this downward trend, then we can intervene faster. So we are in talks with a number of hospital groups and national health services about getting our technology into the hands of patients and sharing that data with clinicians or with family members for that matter. So you can do earlier interventions that are more effective, lower cost, and will reduce suffering.
Are there particular conditions that you imagine this could be particularly helpful for? I imagine things like bipolar disorder, where the peaks and the troughs of energy and mood are seemingly unpredictable, but I guess you could start to predict them. Depression and other related conditions. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think number one and number two are depression and anxiety disorders, in which you do see impaired social interactions. Yeah, and then I think bipolar would, as you said, would be looking at the variance of that. So high variance on peaks and troughs would not be good. So we have some new research showing that you need 6 of these peak immersion moments lasting 3 minutes or longer to build your emotional health. And if you have 4 a day, you're kind of maintaining. And once you get fewer than that, and we see these troughs, and we can quantify what a trough means, how far below average do you have to be, and for how long. You have 6 troughs a day, you're depressed. You have low mood, low energy. And so now we have this continuous measure that for people who are vulnerable to mood disorders, you could, again, share that with a clinician. You could share that with a family member and say, hey, sometimes I may need some help. I may not know it, or I may not be motivated to reach out and get help, but I'm going to share this with you because I see you as my support system.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We can try to find these things before they get out of control and unsolvable. That's great.
And also relying on self-report's tough. So I think the paper I sent you was done in a retirement home. So older individuals actually have a higher risk of depression than middle-aged individuals, but are less likely to report symptoms. So we have this big care gap. So if I'm depending on my old person who I love, my parent or grandparent, to report that they're not doing well, right? You're just going to find out when they haven't left the bed for a week and then they're really kind of deeply depressed. So I think just having that, hey, we're all connected. We have people that we really care about, people that we love. And if I can share that data, maybe not all my data, but just sort of red or green, like, hey, Michael's in the green zone. He's awesome. Send you a thumbs up, man. Have a great day. Or, hey, Michael's been in the red zone for 3 days. Man, I should call him and make sure he's okay, right? It reminds us to connect to those people that we do care about and allows us, again, to be of service to others to get that. Imagine if if this was you and me and you're having a bad time and I call you up and like, hey, Michael, just thinking about you. What can I do to help? It looks like you shared your data with me and you're like, dude, I'm just struggling for blah, blah, blah. And then we have a discussion. Well, I also get that neurologic value. Right? I'm getting emotional resonance from helping you. So now we have this nice reciprocal relationship. It's not one-sided. I get to be a helper and have the value of helping someone else, and you get the benefit of that helping. And hopefully I can bounce you. If I don't give you a peak immersion moment, at least I have kind of bounced you out of that trough, perhaps.
You talked about hugging, so there's touch, there's slowing down. But one thing I love that you say sometimes is listen with your eyes. Like, oh, you can listen with your eyes to people, to the world around you, to whatever. And then there's also the voice. These are two other components that I just love. I love to use, but I think you're more of an expert on the usage of these. It seems like you've really honed the instrument. So can you tell us about, I've kind of already laid it out, listen with your eyes, but yeah, talk about what you mean by listen with your eyes and maybe talk about the voice as well.
You're really giving people that full attention. So if you're looking at them, then they know that you are attending to what they're saying. And to me, that's this gift of attention, which is scarce, right? In English, we say paying attention. And metabolically, that's exactly what happens. It's very metabolically costly to pay attention to someone. And therefore, it's valued, right? If I give you this valuable gift of my attention, I'm saying you're important, right? And I think when we slow down on our language and our voice is not so hurried, we're allowing time for these deeper conversations. So I have two daughters. I have one daughter who is an introvert, one who is an extrovert. And the introvert and I, surprisingly, have done hour and a half phone calls. And my wife, who's an extrovert, said, how can you talk to her for an hour and a half? My wife's always talking, right? Always talking. And then for me as introvert, I reach capacity. But we'll have long periods of silence. Maybe we're driving somewhere, she's driving or she's talking to me, and I may be doing something else. And then she gives her time to kind of think about the next thing she wants to talk about or the follow-on component. So I think you said this in the very beginning, Michael. I thought it was really profound that slowing down, that just focusing on being present and not thinking about the 400 things that I have to do next really is one of the most important gifts you can give to other people, both people you care about, but also think about the person you're trying to sell stuff to or the colleague who, is helping you with a project. Like that kind of, so you don't have to say, I love you to them like me, or you don't have to, give them a hug, but you can actually give them that gift of just your visual attention.
Yeah, but it's scary, at least at first, jumping into that unknown of like, okay, I'm just gonna trust that this works out. It's easier to try to like control the process and push something out there. Like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sell this thing. I'm going to talk about this topic. I'm going to ask this question or whatever. But like throwing that away and be like, okay, I'm just here and let's see where it goes is like, I don't know, that it's like jumping into that water is quite scary. So, but if you do it, whoa, all kinds of cool stuff can emerge.
Yeah. We had a wonderful salesperson, very senior guy, enterprise software sales guy, who worked at our company for a while. And he said the most interesting thing to me, he said, if you're talking, you're not selling. That's like one of those Zen koans, right? In other words, listen to this person. They have a problem. They're talking to me because they have a problem they need solved. And if you can be of service to them, if you have something that helps solve their problem, awesome. if you don't, still listen to them, maybe offer some other product that can solve their problem. Because even now, our software company is 6 years old. So many people I've talked to who are not customers, who have not subscribers to our software platform, will email me and go, I talked to this guy last week and he really needs your product. So I'm going to connect you to him. I'm like, oh, thank you. We're still a startup. We need all the help we can get, but it's really kind of, again, having that service mentality that I think is really important. And then we're back to forming friendships and, having good relationships or of all kinds, even in a romantic relationship, right? You've really got to be of service to that other person at some fundamental level. I mean, you don't want to be just have them take from you, obviously, but I think relationships of all types are about service. So when my children were little, so Michael, we've established I'm a crazy person. So anyone listening, don't take advice from me. But when I put my kids to bed when they were little, I would make them answer 3 questions. And I would say, who loves you best? Who's your number one fan? Who will never, ever leave you? And I need to hear a dad, dad, dad. And I did that for years and years until they got to be whatever, 10 or 12, and they just refused to do it. But I wanted them to know, like, I'm 100% committed to you as a human being. No matter what's happening to you, no matter where you are, you can always call me. I will come there. And I think that level of security, right? We may disagree on things, we may have arguments, but I want them to know that fundamentally, I'm always going to be there for them. And think how secure that attachment is now because of that, and has worked very well with my kids.
Yeah, especially early on. I imagine it'd still help with someone who maybe didn't get that love, doesn't feel safe with others, has like some kind of complex PTSD or whatever. Even as an adult, maybe they finally get it at age 50 or something. But it's harder. But if you can get that early on, God, what a much better life that person will have. Easier life, more social one. Looking back at your life, actually, like when you were say when you were a kid or a teenager, or in your 20s or whatever, and looking at yourself now, you're like 62.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
62.
How has your sort of experience, your peaks and troughs and baselines of immersion changed?
Boy, that's a great question. Yeah, I'm going to go back to some of the scientific research before I talk about myself, because then it's generalizable. So one of the real inhibitors of social connection, of oxytocin release, is high levels of testosterone. So oxytocin increases empathy. That's why it helps facilitate social connections. I understand your emotional state better when my brain releases oxytocin. So when I have high levels of testosterone, which is males 15 to 25 roughly, I become self-focused. So we've done a lot of research with testosterone administration studies and looked at social behaviors. They become very self-focused, overly optimistic, risk-taking, right? This is all teenage boys, which you and I used to be. So we can confirm that. And so what's interesting about human as social creatures is that if men are in committed relationships, their testosterone tends to fall, which means more opportunity to release oxytocin and connect. When they have children, their testosterone falls. And now, Michael, only from my own experience, if you have girl children, you pick out little dresses every day, you become a girly man and you're super sweet and cuddly and warm. And so I think nature helps us adapt to those environments. So certainly, I'm a big guy, I'm an athlete, I'm muscular, I'm very driven. I have learned to be more patient, more loving, to be calmer. But I think it's very hard for lots of young people, male or female, who want to take on the world, who have a lot of energy and they're excited, to just slow it down a little bit and really spend time with others, but also spend time with yourself.
Yeah. And there we go. There we go. We get a little pause.
Yeah.
You don't always have to have a question, because when you're podcasting, you feel like I have to keep going. I can cut out the pauses, but maybe I won't this time.
I love the pauses, honestly.
If we were maybe allowed more pauses in all of this, might actually lead to like better podcasts as
Oh,
well.
I love that. Or better lives. I love the pause. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do we have to fill life with so much noise? Why can't we just be quiet?
Yeah. And then when you can trust each other and feel like I don't have to impress you, like part of me, like I think a lot of podcasters, there's this feeling of, oh, I have to kind of impress people, maybe writers as well, a lot of creatives. But when you can like let that go, it's like, oh my God, life is so much easier, and actually everything kind of gets better. Yeah. How do you when you spend time alone and you find that presence and immersion within yourself? What kinds of things do you like to do?
Yeah, a lot of it is being in nature. And as you know, there's lots of research on how healing it is to be in nature. Well, I think I have the best job in the world for me, where I get to go deep into solving little riddles. We call this research, but to me, it's solving riddles. And then sometimes creating technologies that can help other people solve those riddles as well. It's super fun to have great teams and people you really trust. So, three of the people in my company are former PhDs who did their research in my lab. So, people I know deeply, deeply. We've been on the road together. We've done field studies. I did 10,000 blood draws in the last 20 years, Michael. So, we've all processed tons of tubes of blood, and you really get to know people when you're tired and you're traveling and you're stressed out and the experiment's going bad or someone gets hurt or something. So one of the soapboxes I've been on is the value of stress. So, we think of stress as a bad thing, but stress in terms of physiologic arousal just says, hey, this is important. Keep doing this thing. So chronic stress is bad. Chronic stress is probably 2 weeks or longer where you can't sleep, you're perseverating about something, you can't get away from it. But episodic stress, we call challenge stress, really good for you. It gives you a sense of accomplishment. I did something important. If stress were not good, why would you ever work out? Right? That's physiologically stressful. So I want to encourage people to think about emotional stress, right? Do something that's emotionally difficult to build those emotional muscles, build up that emotional fitness. And oftentimes, again, that's with other people. Not always, but I think, there is a addition to that, those high immersion moments when you have, it's like traveling. Traveling by yourself is great. I've traveled the world by myself, but traveling with someone else where you can go, oh my God, look at that great painting. Or can you imagine this sunset, right? It adds a little extra layer of social emotional value to it.
Yeah. I'm going to give it like a kind of random question that isn't really flowing with this conversation, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm kind of curious about how to get the dopamine into our prefrontal cortex, because when we hear the word dopamine, I guess there's different pathways in the brain. Sometimes it might get in that whole you get in a whole addictive kind of reward loop, and sometimes it's a sort of attention focus type when it reaches these outer layers of our brain. How do we kind of shift the path of the dopamine?
It's a great question. And so the immersion loop is the first thing that happens to have an immersive or highly valuable experience is that I'm present. And so that's really, again, focusing my attention on what's happening around me. So that's dopamine binding to prefrontal cortex. Then if that experience creates emotional resonance for me, that oxytocin release will then induce via receptors in these so-called reward areas or reinforcement areas, greater dopamine release in this midbrain striatal area. And so we're essentially creating a feedback loop that says, these are valuable things, do them again. So this is why creating extraordinary experiences for customers at businesses increases what's called customer lifetime value, how much I'm going to spend over my lifetime on this product or service or going to this restaurant, whatever it is, because my brain's saying, hey, this is awesome, do more of this thing, but also builds up that ability to have these peak immersion experiences. And so yeah, the first thing is this sort of quiet, being present, blocking out these other factors and really having that attention. And that's going to be that frontal dopamine. So again, for listeners, the drugs that increase attention for things like ADHD, like Adderall, Ritalin, those increase dopamine binding in prefrontal cortex. So that's exactly what they're doing. But we can do that naturally, right? We can focus our attention on this particular thing that's going on.
I interviewed this guy from the Polyvagal Institute. His name is Michael Allison, but it's all part of polyvagal theory.
Yeah.
This idea of play. Play is an interesting state, and it actually sounds quite similar. There's a big overlap between play and the way you're using the word immersion. Play, according to him, and this theory, is a state where we're in this sort of sympathetic arousal. We've got the dopamine, we've got the adrenaline, but we're safe and social. I imagine we've got oxytocin and serotonin at the same time. So you're in this sort of active, ready to go fight flight state, but you're harnessing this energy towards loving and connecting with others. And it's like, whoa, we can be sort of ramped up with the dopamine, yet at the same time have the oxytocin. And together that creates this sort of state where we are safe and playful and connected. And like, whoa. So maybe this also might people might start playing more when they're in these states.
What a great question, Michael. Exactly right. So we do see a lot of peak immersion moments at play, but play that's moderately competitive, right? So if I'm playing by myself and hitting, I don't know, tennis ball against it's not that, but if I'm playing tennis against somebody else and then I fall and we laugh and, I'll give you a great example of this. Gave a talk at something called Nudge Stock, which is run by Ogilvy, big ad agency that's used our software. And it was last summer in London. It was really hot. It was a heat wave. It was outdoor, no air conditioning because it's England. And anyway, I'm about to give my talk. I'm halfway through. I have one video to show, and the screen, because it's so hot, fizzes out. Now, there's screens in the rest of the room. And so the video was of this Diet Coke ad with this woman dancing in a very weird way. So it's not a likable ad, but it's actually a very immersive ad. And that was the point I was trying to make was that even though consciously you say, this is not really a likable ad, this woman's dancing in this weird giraffey way. And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, people in the back who still have a working screen can see it, but people in the front can't. So I'm like, okay, for people in the front, I'm going to try to mimic this weird dance. And so I'm 6'4", I'm dancing, and I'm white. I can't dance. I'm dancing in the weirdest possible way. Everyone's now laughing, and we're hot. They're handing out bottles of water. It's like people are sweating. It was so fun. When we measured immersion for all the talks on that day of Nudge Talk, who was the most immersive speaker? I was. Again, not because I'm so great, because I had this wonderful human experience, which is the technology failed and I had to just do the weirdest thing ever to keep people with me. And we all relaxed about how weird it is to be a human and be around other humans and be in a hot room. And so anyway, I think that's an example of play that I'm just going to play with these people because I have no other choice. So yeah, I think you're brilliant. So I think I'm going to amend what I said about being present. How about playing? Finding a way to play together. And this is why I think dogs do so well to create peak immersion moments. They want to play, and children do too. So maybe adults need to more.
But a precondition for play, like with immersion, is a feeling of safety, the psychological safety. If you're not safe, like the example that Michael Allison gave was, imagine you're playing football or soccer or something, and the guy bumps into you, the other player, but he gives you sort of this angry glance afterwards or something. You're like, okay, this is not play anymore. Now we are in competition or we are fighting or something. But if he does that whole kind of like, oh, sorry kind of thing with his kind of bowing his head and kind of looking at you and smiling and
Nice.
laughing, using his facial musculature in a certain way, in his eyes, you're like, oh, okay, we're just playing, we're fine. And then,
Right. It's all fun.
but
Yeah.
you have to feel safe. You have to feel safe.
Yeah, exactly right. So I developed this physiologic measure of psychological safety that captures that. Are you comfortable in this environment? Again, sort of table stakes, right? If you're not comfortable, it's not going to be a great experience for you, right? So number one, yeah, create that psychologically safe space so you can enjoy yourself. It's so important, like employees at work, right? You've got to have psychological safety. You just can't perform well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like what you said, that this kind of hand signals. Once in San Diego, I was at the beach playing basketball, and a couple guys from the Boston Celtics came in, but we knew who they were. Like, it was obvious, and they just wanted to play a little ball with us. And of course, they were just playing nice. They're just shooting around. I got to play with a couple of the Celtics. It was fun. They didn't knock people over. They wouldn't have to show off. They're just on the beach, and they saw some guys playing ball, and they're going to do some pickup ball. So, I think it's modulating that play so that it's fun for everybody.
I just got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
One, you're using the smartwatch sensors, the sensors in there to do all this. Are there other technologies that exist or that maybe you're waiting for? I don't know, maybe eye tracking or something you're hooking up to the brain. I don't know, that you think might be useful if the technology gets there.
Yeah, we had millions of dollars of taxpayer money in the US. And so we actually measured every possible technology and began to combine them, studies in which we measured, hundreds of brain signals simultaneously. And I think the smartwatch is the best scalable technology. We can actually get these signals from a camera, but you really have to be well lit, close to the camera. So the smartwatch is nice because in the US, about 60% of the people have smartwatches. They're mobile. We've written code that lets us control for movement artifact, right? If you're moving around, that's changing your physiologic state. So I think for now, that's state of the art. We looked at crazy stuff. So I'm not going to talk about what those crazy things are because some of those were sort of, DoD kind of black stuff. But, let's say like lasers and all kinds of weird stuff. So, we can get signals, but I don't want to be pointing lasers at people. And I don't think the government should do that either.
What are your thoughts on EEG? There's like these Muse headbands, and there's BrainBit, and there's different ones. I imagine, and I guess a lot of us will look at that and say, "Oh, that must be better than the watch." But it sounds like what you're saying is not really.
Right, for two reasons. One, again, these signals we're getting on how you value social emotional experiences are deep in the brainstem. So EEG is getting this outside the brain called the cortex, so it doesn't reflect emotional experiences very well. Number two, do you want to walk around with a weird thing on your head?
Yeah.
That just seems odd. And we've done, medical grade, high density, 120 lead EEG, and the Muse headsets are getting better and better. They're okay. They're fine for gaming and stuff, but they're not really, a scalable technology. They have some nice software for Muse does, in fact, for helping people kind of focus on being present. Awesome. I'm good with that. But in terms of emotional responses, it's not the right technology.
Yeah, you're also kind of a master of language. Huh? I love the way you maybe you're coining certain words, maybe you're borrowing them from others. But there's some words you use like digital bioassay, or like my favorite is neuroscience as a service. I imagine just knowing you probably made that one up, which is like, oh, it's
I
beautiful.
did.
It's so great. Like, yes, you're like creating new industries with your words. What are some other kinds of companies or services that you imagine might emerge in the coming years under this umbrella of neuroscience as a service? Maybe these are ideas for wannabe potential future entrepreneurs or something.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of this, the recommendation engines are going to start using neuroscience measures. Why are you asking me if I want a new song in my playlist? Why don't you know what kind of music I need right now? I mean, I think that's easy. Entertainment for sure, TV shows, movies. I think, there's some ethical issues. So, and I wrote a book in 2022 called Immersion. And I have a whole chapter on the ethics of kind of mind reading, if you will. And, you really have to opt in. I don't want to do this without people knowing and opting in. But suppose you get free internet if 10 minutes a day I get to measure your immersion in some ads that I send to you. And that I can use that to better, focus advertising on stuff you really care about. Like, I watch YouTube like everybody else, and 95% of the stuff I see, I'm like, man, they don't know me at all. This is not even close to what I'm doing. But if I mentioned Tahiti, I just mentioned Tahiti. I'm sure I'm going to start getting ads for Tahiti. So I don't know, Siri, someone's listening to me. So yeah, I think it's going to really improve our ability to know ourselves, what our preferences are. As you said, we don't always know our own preferences, but also help businesses that want to satisfy those preferences kind of meet us without having to bother us about what we like or don't like. If liking predicted outcomes, then every movie will be a hit. You just ask people if you like it. It just doesn't predict. So we need some other measures.
Yeah.
But yeah, with privacy, lots of privacy controls.
Yeah, and you have that with your service, with your
Yeah.
neuroscience as a service. Another problem with ads and other businesses is oftentimes they don't have a call to action at the end. They're just like, okay, and then there's this wasted opportunity. We don't need a call to action today necessarily in this podcast because we're not really selling anything. But if there was some kind of call to action or calls to action you'd have for people, what would they be?
In terms of living a better life, or in terms of
In terms of, let's say, in terms of living a better life, let's start with that, and then maybe something to promote your stuff as well.
Oh, thank you for asking that. Yeah, so I think the 5 pillars to live a long, healthy, and happy life are diet, exercise, sleep, having a rich social network, and then having a sense of purpose. Like, besides your work and family, what makes you feel like you're contributing to the planet? So people with a sense of purpose really actually are much happier. And then the app is free. So the next version launches September 15. It's called Six, SIX, because we've shown that people need 6 of these peak immersion moments to build their emotional fitness. And you can find me at getimmersion.com.
Is six the same as Best Tuesday Ever? Because I searched for Best Tuesday Ever and I couldn't find it. I'm like, where is this app? Is this a rebranding? Is that what that was?
It's a rebranding, exactly
Okay.
right, based on new research. And what we found was that, so Best Tuesday Ever was V1 of our emotional fitness app. They actually were giving people too much information. So second by second, you don't really need to know. You really need to know, like, over the past half an hour? Did I have a peak immersion moment? And so, yeah, we really improved the user experience. And the new version actually has a large language model trained up that will give you advice in advance of the experiences you're having. So it links to your calendar. So once the app learns what you love doing and what you don't, it'll say, hey, you have this meeting with Michael in the next hour. Those meetings are fabulous. Skip the coffee. It's going to be wonderful. Or you have a meeting with Bob in the next hour. Those meetings tend not to be very good. So you might want to meditate for 5 minutes before you go in, or, prepare yourself. So again, I really want to be in the world of creating a bit more well-being, greater happiness, extending people's lives. And yeah, I'm 62. So, I got another 10 years or so to work. And that's the most important thing I can do with my time, is to create knowledge and technology so people live longer, happier, and healthier.
Okay, so like had I been wearing an Apple Watch or Fitbit or something during this conversation and had the app open or whatever, I would be able to like look at, oh, this is how the experience was. This is how much I like Zach, or this is how much these words resonated with me, or etc. How widely can we use this app? Because originally you were definitely using it for corporations in advertising and film and education and training. But it sounds like what you're saying is we can use it for this is for our personal life, just for all of our experiences. Is that correct? Or yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this new app is really the first consumer-facing app we've
Okay.
created. Again, we had a kind of baby V1, which was called Tuesday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for businesses, you want to create great experiences for customers and for employees. The whole plan of the company was to make a consumer app that everyone could use for free, by the way. The basic version is always going to be free.
Uh-huh.
So people can use it and figure out what they should be doing to be happy.
Awesome. If people want to connect with you, you have a bunch of websites. What are the most relevant ones today?
Easiest one is getimmersion.com, immersion with an I. You can find out everything there. And if you guys are listening and you want to email me, have questions, feel free.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks again. And looking forward to using the app.
Well, thank you for getting up so early on your vacation to spend time with me. It was a pleasure.